Welcome everybody to Triangle Skeptics Culture Club. The date as we record this is the 25th of September, 2024. Time flies, and I'm very pleased tonight to say that we have Erika Engelhaupt joining us. She's the author of the book Gory Details, which was our Culture Club selection for this month. And rather than try to say a bunch of sincere words about Erika, which I absolutely could do, she's very kindly offered to give her own introduction. So Erika, the floor is yours. Get us rolling.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so as Jeff mentioned, so I'm the author of the book Gory Details. I'm a science journalist. I have a science background in environmental science and biology, and went into science journalism basically while I was in grad school working on a graduate degree. And I moved to DC, did internships at various places like NPR and in newspapers. And I just have always had a passion for science, nature, the environment. And that led me to want to write about all kinds of different topics in science. I ended up working at National Geographic as the online science editor. And while I was there, I was fortunate enough to be able to bring a blog that I was doing at Science News Magazine over to National Geographic, and it was called Gory Details. And it grew out of my own interest in all kinds of weird, strange, creepy, gross science, you name it.
Yes.
If it was weird and cool in my mind, then I wanted to be able to write about it, and the blog was a great outlet for that. And after I went freelance in 2016, I was again fortunate in that National Geographic decided they would be interested in doing a whole book of Gory Details. So I built out of what was on the blog and wrote a lot of new material and updated a lot of things that were originally on the blog. And it was just so much fun. I got to travel around. I got to meet so many fascinating scientists and cover so many things. So I pretty much got the writing bug, the book author bug with Gory Details. And now my career has basically turned to writing books full time. I occasionally will write in our magazine article, but for the most part, not doing much editing and article writing anymore, and I'm focused on books. And my second book has just come out with a cover that may look sort of familiar and that also glows in the dark. And it is called Go to Hell, A Traveler's Guide to Earth's Most Otherworldly Destinations. Which I think may be of interest even to the skeptic community, because, so I guess I could tell you a little bit about I've always been a scientist and I suppose a skeptic at heart, but when I really discovered the skeptic community was when I was invited to speak for, when I was invited to speak for CSICon in Las Vegas, and that was a lot of fun, and I really met a lot of people who I really started to understand what the skeptic community was all about, because keeping in mind that my background was in environment, my initial jobs in science journalism were covering climate change primarily. And so a lot of the people who had kind of hijacked the term skeptic were climate skeptics who were actually anti-science.
Yes.
And me being a scientist and someone who was writing about climate change from the science perspective, that that gave me kind of the wrong impression of what
Okay.
skeptics were, right?
Right.
And so it really wasn't until years later that I started to understand that there was a community of people who were pro-science, pro-rationalism, and who also called themselves skeptics.
Skeptics. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. So bringing that back to this next book, as soon as people see the word hell, they think, oh, is this a book about religion? And the answer is, well, yes and no. Certainly, cultures around the world have a lot of ideas, and throughout history have had a lot of ideas about the afterlife and hell and purgatory and all these different things. And what was fascinating to me was when I was working at National Geographic, I started getting interested in just some of the most amazing natural wonders in the world, things that were, caves and volcanoes and things like that, that were awesome in the true sense of the word, that really bring awe. But a lot of these places also have been linked to ideas of hell. And so in talking to my editors at National Geographic, I pitched the idea of doing a book about the world's most awesomely awful places, and lots of things that were flaming and so forth. And they were like, you know what, we would really be interested also if you could make it about hell, because people are really fascinated by these topics. And I thought, you know what, this is actually a great way to get a group of people interested in the science and the culture and history of these places, who might not otherwise necessarily be. So when you look through this book, so it is a travel book of places, a number of which I have gotten to travel to for research. And they're all linked to either legends and lore about hell, mythology, and you learn about the science and the cultural history of these places, or they're places that have inspired writers and artists and thinkers' visions of what hell would be like. So again, I think it's really fascinating, even if you are someone who is an atheist, even if you're someone who's a complete non-believer. I think it's really fascinating to see where these ideas have come from and how they have moved around through history and crossed over from culture to culture. So let me just show you, if I can share my screen.
Sure.
I have just I have a few of my pictures and videos that I've taken from some of my own travels to some of these places, just to give you a taste of some of the kind of places that are featured here. This is Bracken Cave in Texas, the world's largest bat colony.
Whoa.
This is literally millions of bats coming out. This is in Ireland. This is one of the gates to hell. This is another one, which is a cave in Ireland called Onagat. St. Patrick's Purgatory. This is Herculaneum, where you can still see remains of people who were destroyed in the Vesuvius eruption. This is in Naples, the Church of Purgatorio ad Arco, where there was a Neapolitan skull cult that prayed for the souls of those in purgatory. And this is in New Zealand. Oh, just some of the most gorgeous volcanic features that you can completely, that are just so otherworldly, and that you can really see how some of these kinds of features have inspired visions of the afterlife and hell. This is where the Maori people of New Zealand believe that their dead leap off into the ocean for their afterlife. It's called Cape Ringa, and it's also where the Tasman Sea and the Pacific meet. This is all, I could have spent all day here. This is Frying Pan Lake, also in New Zealand.
Wow.
So I had so much fun traveling to these places. They really are spectacular. So that is my plug. That is my plug for some of the kinds of fun places. And I hope you guys would enjoy those as well. But moving on to the next thing, I'm now working on a book about the science of real world superpowers. So I'm thinking hard about all kinds of things related to not only the science of real world superpowers, but also there will be some debunking of fake superpowers. So I will get to include lots of things from, the debunking of psychics and telekinesis and all of those not so real superpowers. So that's what I'm working on now. And so as you can see, I have a really fun job.
I'm envious.
And
Yeah.
and I'm always just so super happy for anyone to be interested in the things that I'm writing about and to talk about them. So with that, I guess if folks have questions, want to talk about any particular things from Gory Details, I'm all yours.
I'd just like to mention it was actually in Herculaneum 2 weeks ago, I think. It was
Really?
we took just a cruise on the Eastern Mediterranean, and that was one of the places we stopped. So
Lovely. Yes.
So-
Well, and see, now if you had had my book, you would have had so many other great little pit stops in Naples as well, because I was amazed at just the number of places that were so fascinating on my health theme.
yeah. We
to
also
go
stopped
to.
in Naples, but I think we just had a pizza there, and didn't see much else. It was
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you missed out because Naples is a great city.
darn, if I known that book probably would have changed the whole experience. We should have
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Well, it's not too late. I mean, there are a lot of places. Most of the places in the book are places that you can go and that are a lot of fun to add on to a trip to, for example, to Ireland, to Italy, to New Zealand, things like that. So yeah, it's just a different kind of perspective and some places that you might not have heard of.
Super cool.
Well, is the book already out, Erika?
Yeah,
Go
Go
to
to Hell
Hell?
just came out. It just came out in August. And so it's available on, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places. There's also an audiobook version, which is great if you like to listen to books that way. But for me, I like having the pictures because especially with a National Geographic book, there's going to be good photos.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
So
Awesome. Erika, did you use the same illustrator for the second book?
yeah, the same illustrator did the cover, who did it for Gory Details. And yeah, and did a very nice job. It's definitely on the spooky side with the bats and Cerberus, the three-headed dog that,
Yeah.
is the legendary guardian of the gates of hell. So yeah.
Some might say the inspiration for Fluffy in the Harry Potter universe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Once you start seeing all of the, reading some of the mythology, the classics, the Greek and Roman, and then when you get into like Dante's Inferno and so forth, you start seeing references to that in pop culture everywhere. So now I see it all the time. And there's a new TV show on called Chaos on Netflix that is like, they kind of take Greek mythology, the Greek gods, and put them in a sort of a modern day setting. It's a lot of fun. And they're going through the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, which I also mentioned in the book, because that also involves Orpheus going to Hades to rescue Eurydice from the underworld. So yeah, you just start to see these references everywhere. Once you start thinking about them, you can't stop.
Love it.
Getting to your Gory Details,
Yes.
I just want to say, I'm pretty sure my dog would eat my face. So,
An 8-week-old puppy,
Yeah.
and he's tried 3
Yeah.
times today alone to eat my face.
Absolutely.
I've been calling her face eater and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is one danger of what I do, is that once you learn these things, you can never
Yeah.
unlearn them.
Oh, yes.
And
You never look
Yeah.
at some things the same way again.
and the germs and the quality of her spit.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. And
Yes.
I will say I have become more vigilant about hand washing and things like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
after my cats have
Yes.
been licking my hands and so forth. And which I think is a good thing to just be aware of. There's so many of these kind of strange medical myths and misconceptions that stick around, like dog spit being antibiotic and being good for cleaning wounds. I will never understand why people want that to be true so badly, but they seem to.
Have you seen what
have
else
kept
they
that
spend an
idea.
awful lot of time licking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where the logic of that came from.
I got
but-
bit by a dog and they would not stitch up the wound because of the bacteria that could still be there. So you have
Yeah.
to leave it open and take antibiotics.
Yeah.
And I was
Mm.
just like,
Clean
really?
it
Like,
really well. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. No, I mean, there have been people
bacterial
who've lost
infections you're more
limbs.
worried about than rabies now. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
cat bites as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I also was I've been bitten by dogs and cats, and it was loving cat. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I got the blood disease. I forgot what you call it. When
Ooh.
the
Sepsis.
yes, whatever it was.
Mhm.
Oh,
But my whole leg became inflamed, and it was very painful.
That's no
But
joke.
so you don't want to mess with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, y'all are right. So
I
Yeah.
got bit by my cat, but it was just it wasn't a bite where he was intentionally trying to bite me. It was more of a nip where it was scraped a layer of skin, and it bled so much that I'm sure that washed any infection out of it, because it bled a lot.
Yeah. Well, and you hope so,
hurt.
but
Yes.
but that's
But there was
but
no
you never
puncture.
know. Like you could have a colony of something on your skin that it finds some way in, and then you
Yeah.
have endocarditis because
Right.
it's now you've got a bacteria colony vegetating on like your heart valves.
Yeah.
I read about this stuff at
I've
work.
had that.
but It's crazy. Like people don't think, like drug abusers, they're at risk of getting infections like that because they introduced the bacteria.
Yeah.
Or I had a case where somebody had both of their legs amputated because of bacteria that entered when they had injected heroin in their arm.
oh
It
man.
it was horrible, but you read about it, and
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you don't get medical care or get it treated, or sometimes you don't even know you have it, and then it is septic. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I've had
so-
it. I have endocarditis, or I've had endocarditis. The bacteria got lodged on the back of the aortic valve. So it would release bacteria, and I would get a fever, and I would get a fever about twice a day, and it was a common bacteria, so the body would kill it almost immediately, but it would just keep coming back because it was in an area where there was a low blood supply, so it really wouldn't kill it all the way. And they gave me strong antibiotics, but that still didn't kill it, so they had to actually replace the heart valve.
Whoa.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah,
So-
it was, well, it was okay. I mean, they kept coming around trying to give me a strong painkillers, and I said, well, it really doesn't hurt that much. What really did hurt is when they, the day I was supposed to be released, I got AFib, atrial fibrillation,
Yeah.
and they tried to give me drugs, but that wouldn't stop it. So they finally had to shock the heart to get the beat back in
Oh.
rhythm.
Yeah.
That really hurt, because that
Mm.
is all of the muscles in your chest wall are suddenly compressed or tightening at one time,
Ooh.
and that
Wow.
hurt worse than the operation.
You were being electrocuted, for lack of
Yes.
a better term.
Yes.
Mm.
Well,
They were
not
trying to-
electrocuted, because that implies death, but
Yeah, well,
electrified, I think, is the word.
you were being
Electrified. Yeah.
electrified. What they were doing is trying to shock the irregular rhythm out. so
Right.
that
Yes,
your heart
that's right.
would Get
Mm.
back.
And it
Well, I
did.
see hospital
That's
shows
also
in there.
another misconception is people think when you go into a systole, which is flatlining, oh, let's bring out, and shock it back into regular, like, no, you need epinephrine for that. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing
Oh.
to shock back into a beat. There's no electrical impulse.
Yeah.
When I watch the hospital TV shows, they're doing that about 3 times an episode,
That's
aren't they?
Yeah.
Doing and I didn't know it was
Yeah.
terribly painful. It just person, wakes up, hey, it's a victory.
Everything's
Yeah.
fine. Joy, I
No,
see you got a hand
they
up. What's
put
on
me
your
to
mind?
sleep for the actual thing. But, they gave me I was asleep for about 10 minutes, but when I came back, everything hurt.
Oh,
So can I ask you guys a question? Had you
Yeah.
ever heard, had you heard of brainworms before?
I had RFK Jr. I've heard of. I was just going to
Um,
say, I must have anticipated that.
Well, I was fascinated when they started reporting about him having the brainworm. I immediately wanted to know, well, is this the rat lungworm that I've written about? And they've never said what species, of worm it has. I don't know if the doctors found out or not. Because typically you're not going to, it's not like they did brain surgery to extract it or anything like that. Presumably it just died in there and they treated him with antibiotics, whatever they did.
He seems like the kind of guy that might eat slugs from time to time. I don't know.
It's it can happen to the best of us, right?
Wash your produce.
But
Wash your
given his
produce.
penchant for eating wildlife, I think there's a number of things that could have been. And I don't know, I don't have any inside knowledge on it, but there are parasites carried by raccoons, and a lot of other mammals. And so, who knows, maybe it was one of these bears that he picked up on the side of the road or some other roadkill or something like that. But yeah, I found out about the raccoons have a similar thing to the rat lungworm that can also infect humans and get to the brain.
I found a PBS article and they said it was a pork tapeworm larvae.
Pork tapeworm. I haven't seen that. Interesting.
So it has been verified. I just
That's
assumed
not
he
because
made it
that's
up.
not typical for
Yeah, they said
think of
particularly
pork.
in developing places is where they can get it.
Okay.
I just kind of assumed that he made it up. Like I read about it and was like, he's probably making it up.
Yeah, no, it is a real thing. It is a real thing that can happen and pretty scary. I mean, when I found out about the rat lungworm that can go through slugs and snails and end up in people, that has also changed my fastidiousness about washing lettuce and things like that. Because when you think about it, you could have a small slug or something, just in produce.
Oh yeah.
So it can happen. And that can be just devastating. I mean, think about having, I think about having a worm in my brain. That's, to me, that's like different people have different things that gross them out the most. To me, that's the scariest.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, and you were talking about pee in the swimming pool.
Mhm.
And I swim every other day, or a dog paddle. I don't really swim because everybody goes faster than me. But I've always thought about all the pee and etc. that's in that water when I'm swimming in it. It's an indoor pool. But I just have to put it out of my mind and think, everybody's been doing this, and your reassurance at the end of the chapter, that this is just actually a minute percentage of possibility that it could be harmful. But that's the way I think I have to look at the whole world, because when y'all talk about the worms and all that, because I read a lot of the medical books too. I think they're fascinating, and maybe I'm the weirdest person alive, but on death and dying.
I'm sure you're not.
No.
It's fascinating. So, by the way, I loved your book, and I was talking before we started how much I like Mary Roach and how this reminded me of Mary Roach.
Well, that's a compliment. Thank you.
Oh, it's just want. Do you know Mary Roach?
I have met her. And she is delightful, of course. But yeah, we commiserate. I've only met her in person once, and communicated with her by email a couple times, but we commiserated about, you know, when you write about gross and weird things,
Yeah.
people either think you write for children, which neither of us, our books are definitely not
No.
children's books. Or they want to suggest to you, for some reason, so many people, she said, have suggested to her that she should write a book about butts.
But
And I was like, yeah, people are always suggesting to me that I write a book about poop. And I'm like, well, you know, I think I've
But you
said as
do.
much as
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
The
think, yeah.
fly poop on the walls that you had to
Oh,
clean
yeah.
off. And,
Yeah.
Oh my God, that
I mean,
Oh,
this,
yeah.
There's,
and
I've written
to
plenty
me,
about poop as it is. I don't think I need to do a
Yeah.
whole book, but
it's the way that you write and the way she writes is so entertaining and so interesting, and it's factual, and you learn. And I was saying earlier, the only
Yes.
bad part about reading all this good stuff is I forget it, you know, so I can reread it and enjoy it again a second time. But and I have read Mary Roach's books and a lot of these other, and I couldn't give you the names because I can't remember them. But
the same way.
but you know, when I'll be reading something that you're writing and go, oh yeah, I've heard of that before, you know, and you give me more detail and validation, and it's just really enjoyable. Just really enjoy it.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I, as a science writer, I have always felt strongly that that it's okay for science writing to be entertaining. I mean,
Yes.
I have had some people in my field are of the school of thought that, you know, everything has to be very well, some people come from more of the background of journalism where it's about digging up scandals and things like that. And there certainly are scandals in science and very serious topics. But I tend to find that even with serious topics like about things that are medical or things that are just serious topics like death, that you really can communicate a lot more information and get people engaged in learning about science when you're telling stories that are more personal, stories that are entertaining, stories that have an element of surprise, and that's okay, that's good, because that taps into our natural curiosity. I think that unfortunately sometimes we tend to drum the curiosity out of people as they as they get older, and so being curious about things that are weird or gross is seen as being something that's for kids, for example. But I don't think that it's just for kids. I think that being curious about the world in all of its glory, including all of the disgusting and creepy and, you know, gross glory, I really think that that is something pretty universal, and it's a really good way of getting people interested and engaged in science in a way that feels much more personal and relatable. Because hey, we're all gross. We all have experienced all of these, you know, weird things. And I find that people are often too embarrassed to talk about some things, and so I've kind of, you know, made it my mission, like, everything's on the table. We can talk about it. It's okay, you know.
And what I wanted to also thank you, because I'm a retired music teacher, and so I don't have a science background. I mean, you know, I took it 45 years ago in college and stuff, but I'm fascinated by it, and I come, parents were educators and scientists. So maybe that's where I have it, but I really appreciate you writing to people like me that can understand it. And I thank you for that. And I will read your upcoming 2 books. I will definitely get those. And so we can put those on the book list, I hope. And and I also want to say, Mary Roach, one year was an editor for, forgive me because I've said this earlier, but every year for a while they came out, some group did with the 10 or the 15 best science articles from journalism,
Mhm.
from journals. And I loved reading those books. So and once again, I'll read them and then I forget it, but I remember a little bit because I can read. But Mary Roach was an editor, and they have a different editor every year. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, I am. I have several of them on my bookshelf.
Okay, good, because I wanted this group to know about it so that we could read some of those as well, because those are highly entertaining, and
Yes.
also I can understand it, and I
Yes.
understand what you're writing. I just love it. So,
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that that is an important thing that science journalists can do is try to make science more approachable because, you know, look, everything doesn't have to be super technical, and you don't have to feel like it's above your head. I think most, you know, for newspapers, you're often, say you're writing to like maybe an 8th grade educational level. And I think that a lot of science writing really can aim to the same kind of level without necessarily, that's the hard part, is you don't want to sacrifice the, you know, the quality of the information and getting things correct. So that's where it becomes difficult. And I've worked at a variety of places, from Science News magazine, which is geared toward a more science enthusiast, kind of like Scientific American, people who may have a little bit more of a science background, may have at least taken classes in science in college, at the college level. And then I've worked at, you know, written for newspapers, and, you know, even for National Geographic, we really try to make it as broad as possible, so that people, you know, anyone who's interested can read it, can understand it, and get the facts. Because there's certainly, it's become a challenge, to say the least, with
Yes.
the amount of misinformation and just, frankly, nonsense, just people who don't know what they're talking about, that are putting things out on social media, podcasts, internet, whatever. And we saw it so much with the pandemic. So that was very hard. That was very hard for people from my community of science journalists, because sometimes it just feels like you're screaming into the wind, you know, saying, no, we need a vaccine. A vaccine
Yes.
will be a good thing.
Yeah.
And the vaccine will not hurt you. The vaccine will not give you autism, you know, all of these things. And so, yeah, in these days, it does feel more than ever important, not only to get people interested in science, but to get them interested and engaged in understanding how to evaluate scientific information. Because we saw it with the pandemic, you know, if people are getting these different messages, how do they sort out what's true versus what's not? And often they're just falling back on their social communities, and not really feeling like they have a good way of judging information on its own, or judging the source of information.
Is there any way maybe you can write a book about that? I mean, I don't, forgive me, I'll try to tell a real quick story. I went to a niece's wedding in Kentucky, and I was going to go back to the airport with my nephew, and he wanted to stop at the Creation Ark Museum in
Oh.
Kentucky.
Yes.
Are y'all
Yeah.
familiar with that?
Mhm.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
Uh-huh.
he is not a believer. He's not. He
Okay.
wanted to go as out of kind of morbid curiosity.
Right.
I
Okay.
did not want to go, because to me, I did not want to support that absurdity and lunacy. But he really wanted to go, and I loved my nephew, and so I agreed to go with him. He's a professor of economics in Florida,
Okay.
University of Florida. So I mean, he's a smart man. And I was honored that he was letting his old Aunt Joy go with him. So I went with him. But it was one of the most creepy, horrible, horrifying experiences of my whole life, because here were these hundreds and hundreds of people buying tickets and being so excited about going to see this hokey museum. It was just, I can't explain it to you unless you go. So Erika, if you could somehow, and that was the thing too, there was hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people. It was like going to Disney World with a bunch of crazies. I can't explain it. And you know, they had all the shops and stuff that you have for Disneyland and stuff. And but everybody was believing. And you know, one of the big displays was the dinosaurs, and there were Adam and Eve in the water right beside them. It just was sickening. Now my nephew thought it was hilarious, but I was just grossed out by the whole thing. But what I'm trying to say is, brain worms and bats in a cave and my dog's saliva and pee in the pool and all that kind of stuff. Those are facts, and I'm fine with that. That's just the world. That's just the earth. But what I'm afraid of is the crazies that justify everything by saying, oh, it's God, you know, and you cannot, there's no way that you can interact with these people, because they've already decided this is religion, and religion says so. And how do you, Erika, thank you for your thank you.
I truly do get your point. And here's my thing is, so when I set about writing this book, I knew that if I was writing about all of the different ideas about the afterlife that different people have come up with over time, I tell a lot of that story in this book, both through the introduction and then also through the different places. And I was careful about this. I never say, this idea is nonsense, or this idea is nonsense, because there's no point in just attacking someone's ideas about heaven or hell. It's if they believe that and that it's an article of their faith, there's no point attacking it and saying this one's right or that one's wrong. But I think what anyone, whether they believe firmly in their particular faith or not, can get out of this is getting a broader perspective of how, you know, how these ideas have come through history. You can go back and look at, you know, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and see the same ideas that follow through around the world and that pop up in Buddhism, in Christianity, in, you know, even some of the same kind of tropes and characters, the guardian of the gates of hell, the idea that there is an entrance to hell, the idea that there's a river that one crosses. These are all really ancient ideas that go back. And so for me, maybe it's a little bit of a kind of sneaky skepticism, is that I think that anyone, whether they are entrenched in one religious faith or not, really can benefit from seeing that in a broader perspective. And for those who have no faith or who reject all religion, you can see and maybe get a better perspective on where some of those faiths are coming from by seeing the commonalities among all the different cultures throughout time, and how they've had to answer a lot of the same questions and done it maybe in some similar ways, and they face some of the same challenges. I think every culture has, and religion has faced the issue of how do we teach our children morality, and how do we, you know, and whether it's through religion or not, the idea of hell and a place of punishment comes up again and again, because when you think about it, if you are trying to teach your children to be good and act right, it's very helpful to have an afterlife where even if you don't get caught being bad, cheating or stealing, in this life, there's a God who knows. There's some,
Yeah.
there's a force out there that knows, and you will be judged later, and
Yeah.
you will be punished, even if I don't catch you now.
Yes.
So I think, when you start to think about some of our common cultural issues in those kinds of ways, it to me, it's kind of inspiring in the fact that that humans have come up with these kind of ideas over and over again. What worries me, as well as I think you, Joy, is that this can become dogmatic and is then used to separate my religion as right, your religion is wrong. I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell. And I think that if more people had a broad perspective on these things that actually are commonalities that tie us together, maybe we would feel a little bit less, hateful and resentful towards each other. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but that is definitely, that's one of my goals with writing a book like this, is that I grew up, I went to a Baptist school for several years as a kid, and that shaped me, not necessarily in the ways that they always intended. For example, with the Creation Museum. So when I was in this Baptist school as a kid, they taught that there were never any such thing as dinosaurs. And I just I could not accept that. And they had all these different excuses for, it's those dinosaur bones or cow bones that they put together, or they're just animals that are extinct, or, there were just so many different things. And I just asked a lot of questions and was very curious, and that just didn't feel right to me. Well, years later, I ended up going to college and majoring in evolutionary biology because I was very interested in all of these things. And so, I think that religion can be something that spurs your curiosity. For some people, maybe it becomes dogmatic and you can't necessarily break people out of that. But I try to be respectful of people's beliefs while hopefully expanding their knowledge a little bit of what other cultures' beliefs actually are and how they're not actually all that different. And gosh, actually, we've borrowed a lot of ideas from each other throughout human history.
Well, I just hope that your books are never banned, because
well, me too.
Yeah.
I'll hush now. It is something that I've thought about, when I see some of the things that have been banned that are so mild, and I think, gosh, people often do mistake my books for, because of the topic of gory details, they'll think, oh, is that a children's book? And I'm always quick to say no, and it's not sold as a children's book. It's sold as adult nonfiction. But I could easily imagine that, and I think that it has gone to like high school libraries, but I could easily imagine maybe in a high school library, but even if it were in a middle school library, I could easily imagine some parent, saying, oh, this is terrible. We shouldn't be, I don't want my children to have access to something that mentions the existence of sex.
Or even worse, it's the clitoris.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Or that females have a clitoris and that medical science ignored that for
We
centuries.
wouldn't want junior high school kids knowing
there are a lot
about
of
that.
things that that is something that I've thought about. And knock on wood, I haven't had any issues along those lines. But one reason might be because I and National Geographic, I think, have been pretty careful in making sure that we're marketing appropriately toward
And how wonderful that you as a
belongs.
child questioned your teachers, trying to push down your throat that dinosaurs didn't exist.
Yeah, I
But-
remember I really
How
made that teacher
awful.
mad when I just kept, but they're so big, they couldn't be cow bones. I've seen the teeth,
Yeah,
they're this
they're
tall.
But I mean, so many children would not question that.
Yeah.
They would just blindly accept that and then live in this, creationist museum mentality. And I guess I just want to say thank you again and keep fighting and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, the exposure to a huge number of different ideas. I think that was how I kind of lost religion. Is I believed up until I was from a fairly wishy-washy Presbyterian background, so they weren't denying evolution. But I think sometime as I got into college and you learn more about the other religions around the world and the history of religions, and there's
Yep.
religions of all over the place, and they're all different. I mean, like I said, have similarities. And they say, well, almost all of these are wrong. And why do I believe the one I do? Oh, it's because that's what my parents told me. And if I had grown up in India, they would have told me something else. And if I had grown up in ancient Rome, they would have told me something else. And I think, gee, what are the odds that I happen to be the right one? And once you start to see all these possible varieties, and I think, the varieties of hell and stuff like that, it just, it's really people that get sort of stuck in the way they grew up that's what makes it hard to get out of that trap.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for people knowing as much as they can and making a decision for themselves, if you want to land on a particular religion being the right one, that's great. I think it sure would help though to have some context.
Yeah. Well, some evidence, something
Yeah.
evidence other than evidence, which I mean that I was pretty good at, when you're 2 years old, your parents teach you to do grace and bedtime prayer. As far I mean, they know so much more than you. I mean, that's pretty solid basis. I mean, everything else, but
There must be something to this if
yeah,
says so.
until you
Well,
find
and
out
when
that
everyone
there's a
around
whole world
you-
out there saying different
Yeah.
stuff.
And that is a good point. I think a lot of what shapes our worldview is just how big is our world, and for some of us, our world stays very small and we stay in the same place around the same people and so forth. And so why would you expect someone to necessarily buck the system and have a different perspective? And that's where for those who are curious and who are interested in something outside their small world, that's where I hope that science writers have a role to play, and writers like me. I mean, I was such a big reader as a kid. I think that's a big difference.
Oh yeah.
It makes such a big difference in how you grow up and how big your world is, because even as a little kid, living in Missouri or later I lived in Central Florida, and my little world was small, but I read about so many other things and places and even animals and foreign lands and just reading about those kinds of things, even reading fiction like Wizard of Oz books and things like that, but just having an idea, just thinking about possibilities and other places or other kinds of cultures, whether they were real or not.
Yeah.
I think makes a big difference in how you grow up.
Erika, when you wrote about the world's worst sting, it reminded me of when I was about 5 years old. I reached under a picnic table to try to help my dad and felt something soft, and then the wasp stung me in the finger.
Yeah.
And I think that was the worst pain I have ever felt in my life.
Yeah, I think that the scientist who tested the world's worst stings would,
Oh, I can't
he
believe
would,
that.
he would be like, oh, that was a baby sting.
Yeah, but there's a lot of nerves in your finger.
Yes, there
Yeah.
are. And that's why it made such a big difference. The combination of what stings you and where you get stung.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'll always think about that, like the lips and
Oh,
tongue. Oh,
I couldn't imagine getting stung on the lips.
what if it,
Yeah.
or, or one getting into your mouth? I mean, that's so sensitive.
You start out with somebody gets stung on the tongue, which I guess in terms of nerve endings, that's probably pretty.
It's,
Yeah,
you
that's
might be
that's
still
horrific.
able to see the scar right here.
Oh,
where
wow.
When I was like 5, I was sitting on my grandmother's front porch and I felt something tickling my face and I went like this,
Oh no.
and that was a wasp too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
A
That hurt
wasp.
a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That hurt
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Anything on the face that, like, I think I'm trying to remember now. Someone else probably remembers better than I do, having just read the book. The worst places were like, the tongue, lips. I think he had maybe done eyelid.
I think you mentioned the tip of the penis.
I was thinking that too, but I wasn't going to
Yeah.
speak up because it's been a minute since I
I
read the
can't
book.
speak for that one, but it sounds horrible.
It sounds horrible.
It made an impression on me.
Can confirm it's full of nerve endings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any place with plenty of nerves.
Right. Faith Ramiro, either of you got a favorite section?
I mean,
Not a section to get stung, but a section in the
Yeah.
book.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, I may be a little biased because I heard Erika give a talk at SkeptiCamp about the discovery of the clitoris and all of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really interesting, to hear about like, oh, I
I'm
guess all the
so
crazy
glad to
stuff.
hear that from a man's perspective.
Man's perspective.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like one more thing that shows, how women were really, I guess, thought of as second-class citizens, and even until very recently, that was the case.
Well, even now, they go to Afghanistan,
And now in many
there's
places.
property.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
but even
Yeah,
like,
I mean there are still girls having their clitorises removed.
Yes.
And yeah, it's amazing that kind of practice is still going on. But I was shocked to find out how recently
Mhm.
it was going on, even in the United States,
Yeah.
and Europe. Like, who knows how many people suffered that kind of thing. And just, and I also was kind of shocked and horrified by how much damage Freud did to women's, sexual and mental health, basically. With the idea of, there being basically a right way for a woman to have an orgasm and a wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, vaginal sex being the only good way.
Yeah.
And so just the level of judgment and shame, I think, that's been put on women around their bodies and their sexuality
Mhm.
compared to men. I was very compelled to write, when I started learning about that, I was very compelled to write that for the book. And it was a little controversial. I mean, that there was some talk about cutting that section.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's meta.
not attempting to up on there, but
yeah.
but yeah, some higher ups were a little bit nervous about including anything about that. In
That
the
is
book.
biology.
It's biology and it's history.
Yes.
And so I give great credit to former editor-in-chief at National Geographic, Susan Goldberg, because she we sent it up the food chain to her and she reviewed it And she said, oh, I would maybe cut this one little quote that's kind of racy, but other than that, no worries, go ahead. And I really appreciated that. And I thought, you know, not very long ago, there would not have been a day where the decision maker on a question like that would have been a woman.
That's
and
true.
a woman journalist. And so that meant a lot to me that we kept it in the book. And if it ends up getting my book banned somewhere, then I guess so be it.
Well,
I will have to consider it a badge of honor, I suppose.
Yes,
I
it is a
learned
badge of honor. Yes.
Well, and I learned something from it too about, because, you know, I grew up where, you know, you're reading Cosmopolitan, 17 magazine, and they're telling you, oh, this is what you have a G-spot and all this other stuff. And then I'm reading the part of the book going, wait a second, that actually doesn't exist. I don't feel so weird because I could never find mine. Like,
Right,
my
exactly.
understanding, it's just where everything just, you know, meets, and you have to do stuff in a probably a really good coordinated way to get it to actually activate. And it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with me.
No, and
the whole-
everyone's body is different, and
Yep.
just depending on the configuration of your body, you may or may not have sensitivity in that particular area. So, you know, it's one of those things, like, again, I think women have been shamed and made to feel like there's a right way and a wrong way to be sexually, and just to be ashamed of their own
normal
bodies.
bodily functions. Like
Yeah,
when
and
talking about
they just don't talk
menstruation,
about it.
it's like
Yeah,
these are
menstruation.
just the things that happen. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I don't know
I've-
how many of us live in, probably many of us in this room live in states where there is not even sex education of any kind in schools. I don't think Tennessee has.
I have no idea.
I don't
North
know
Carolina
if
has just hardly
I
anything.
did get some form of sex education, but it was more of the biology of, this is like, we were in 5th grade and all of us were talking about, like, are we going to get our period? Is it going to happen in the middle of like finals? And then we'll have to go to the bathroom and get excused. But
right, exactly. So you learn like very basic things about female anatomy. You probably learned a little bit about the reproductive system and that there was a
we
uterus.
learned how babies were born.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I went to college in the 70s, and so I'm maybe one of the oldest ones here.
I went to
don't know,
college
but-
in the 70s, so
Okay, and
60s.
that was, you know, before the AIDS epidemic, and but it was free sex was kind of the thing.
Free love,
And I
yeah.
remember going to my sex psychology class at the University of South Carolina, and just being, because I didn't know this stuff, and just watching these films that they would never show them today, but these sex films of the act and all that. But I mean, at the time, I thought, oh boy, we're going to keep going forward. But instead, we've gone completely backwards. So thank goodness for you, Erika. I keep saying this because it's like one step forward and 2 steps back. And right now we're going backwards. It's just the culture wars are just craziness. But thank goodness there are those of us like here in this group that are open-minded and want to learn, because it's fascinating, it's interesting, and we want to help these poor, abused, marginalized women, other people that have been, you know, are shut up in the dark and don't have access to books or information, and are told this is the truth, you know, this, which of course is not the truth, you know.
one thing about
I just say thank you to all of you, and to anyone who is curious and a reader and who wants to, I mean, all we can do is share information with as many people as we can. And because yes, it's a challenging time in so many ways, and not to get, you know, too political, but it's you know, we're in a time where I think science is really an important part of the battlefield politically, and it really is affecting particularly women's rights, but all of us. And one other thing that I just want to mention on that front is I talk in the book about disgust. And I talked at CSI Con in Vegas about disgust. And one thing that I have been seeing so much lately is the weaponization of disgust, using
Yeah.
things, making other people, making those who you want to demonize out to be doing something disgusting.
Yes.
Like, boy, that's really effective, isn't it? Yeah, it really catches people's attention when you say that people are eating other people's pets, for example,
Yeah.
and outright. And if you start listening, you will literally hear people using the words of disgust, saying, you know, they're disgusting, talking about people coming in and having diseases and things, you know, all of the things that trigger our disgust are getting used against others, getting used against targeted groups
Yeah, vulnerable
politically.
people.
And when
Yeah.
you start thinking about it and you start noticing it, it's more, I feel like it's more than ever in this political
Oh
season.
yeah, because you've probably heard our lieutenant governor has done some very disgusting things.
Yes.
And the problem with that is
amazing.
that it makes the dialogue, you're now marginalizing other groups that may have engaged in something that could be considered perverse. And it's like, it's not the
Right.
perverseness that we're talking about.
Right.
It's
You can like whatever
everything.
kind of porn you
It's the hypocrisy.
enjoy,
It's the
but
hypocrisy and
it's the hypocrisy and the mean-spiritedness.
and then the other
Yes.
things, but
Judgmentalism and just,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
it's amazing. It's
it
amazing.
is,
And
it's awful.
when, and so that's another one, that's another story where, you know, where I just see disgust being used in both ways. And I will say, you know, some people feel strongly like, well, if this group is going to go all out on that kind of language, then their opponents should feel free to hit right back with the same kind of language. Whatever you believe on that front, I will say that I see how effective it is. People are really, disgust is a very powerful emotion. And it's almost up there with anger. And so when you can get people angry and you can get people disgusted, that's a very powerful motivating factor. And you know, to me, even like the thing with JD Vance being weird, which I agree, he is weird. But that's like, weird is a kind of a very mild form of disgust, right? And so it is, you see, I think when you see that, you see Democrats pushing back a little bit, using this kind of like milder form of disgust to say like, ooh, that guy's different, he's weird. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it really caught on, you know, why that was really one of the like more, you know, kind of powerful messages that's come through in the campaign, is being like, huh, yeah, that stuff's weird. So, you know, I don't know. I personally have a little bit of mixed feelings about like wanting to, about, you know, should we be going high when they go low, or you know, there are a lot of political ramifications to using disgust in this way, but I definitely see that it's effective, and I think that it's like out in full force at this time.
One
Yeah,
thing
the
I
whole
noticed about
idea
your book,
of demonizing out groups, I mean, it's basically the Hitler thing. You find some groups, you see if you can get people of fear and dislike of some group, and you're the hero defending, you know, the people like us against the people like them, and that's like a time-honored thing that's been done through the ages, but the state it's done now is nauseating. It just, and I think you have to make people realize whenever somebody is going and they're lies. I mean, it's not even like they're telling the truth about these people. And I just feel like there's something wrong with our education where everybody doesn't immediately when they hear that say, we don't put up with that kind of crap, you know. But unfortunately, half the country is putting up with that kind of crap.
And there we are.
Yeah.
Speaking of disgust, the whole chapter you talked about eating bugs. It's like in my brain, I know that bugs are more sustainable forms of protein.
Mhm.
But I
That's
cannot for
logical,
the
right?
life of me be okay with eating crickets, mealworms, those types of things, because it's just like, it's the texture. There's a visceral reaction that happens. Because I even looked up cricket protein, like thinking, oh, we could try protein. Like, no, we can't. Like,
If you, the cricket protein powder is pretty innocuous. If you just kind of put it in with a smoothie or something, you actually you don't know it's there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the gateway drug to the insects.
I thought you're going to this meeting was just going beyond.
like, I don't
Way
even know
beyond.
if I could have paid for a ticket knowing I would be eating bugs cooked. Like, we have Bug Fest here that I think has already happened this month.
Nice.
And I just could not make myself like, no, I'm not going to have a
It was a challenge for me. You know, I mean, I didn't, like most Americans, I did not grow up eating any insects. And so what I found was it helped me to go to the conference and hear everyone talk about it and just kind of normalize it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're overcoming is what feels normal. And then you start off with something small, like they have little snacks that are, you know, like chips, things like that, where you can't tell what's in it.
Yeah.
So then that's not too bad. And you're like, oh, well, that doesn't taste bad. It just kind of tastes like a chip or whatever. And then you try like the little fried crickets with some popcorn, and they had taken the legs off. So, okay, well, that's not too bad. So then from there I can go, okay, well, throw some ants on that piece of shrimp. It's fine. I'll eat it. You know? So you kind of have to work your way up. And
you
again,
have a cat.
Yeah, it's just about kind of retraining your brain in terms of what's food and what's normal, and because honestly, most of it does not taste any.
We did ant
doesn't
egg
taste like that
tacos
much, frankly.
Oh, I remember that.
Do you like them?
No, I did not like the ant egg tacos.
Yeah, I'm from Mexico, so I enjoy eating the chapulines.
Yeah, I like chapulines in Mexico. I you know, now that I had been to this conference and eaten a variety of things, when I went to Oaxaca more recently, and they had lots of things with chapulines, it was like, oh, no problem. Crickets. I just draw the line at big ones, like big, like I can't do the silkworm pupae.
God.
Those were just kind of too, because they're meaty.
Yeah.
You know,
the chewiness of the texture.
Yeah, it's the texture.
What do you think of disgust in terms of organs? Like, it feels like a lot of people find a lot of disgust in
in organ meats
or intestine or things like that.
Yeah, since I've lived in the South for so long, where more organ meats are eaten, like chitlins and things like that, where you know, so I don't have a big problem with that. And I grew up, and you know, my mom really liked fried chicken livers, so I ate some fried chicken livers as a kid, things like that. So, so I personally have not had a big reaction to that, but a lot of people, and again, I think it's mostly about what you grow up with. I personally, I draw the line at, I won't eat the central nervous system. Anything.
There's good reason to not do that. There's good reason not to eat brain.
There's good reason not
to. Like,
I'm afraid of prions.
Prions, yes.
So
I've read about prions.
Brain or eyes. Yeah, I'm not into that. But that's in my mind, that is very logical. There's good
Yeah.
logical reasons not to
I mean,
eat.
I've
certain
probably
foods.
eaten some of those things in scrapple, but if it's been pulverized where I don't know what it is and everything.
Yeah,
on
as if
texture.
it's fried or cooked thoroughly or something, it's
I
probably
felt it helps a lot if it doesn't look like an animal that you're eating, you know. If I
Yes.
have fillet of something, well,
Right.
okay, it's fillet of something, but
like my cat
but if
keeps
I know I'm eating the whole animal, I know I'm eating all the guts, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's a grasshopper or something like that, I'm doing the entire digestive system of this grasshopper.
Yeah.
That kind of is creepy.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
chitlins,
well, yeah, because
depending
as
on-
Americans, we're used to just we're so selective, we just eat
Mm.
muscle.
Yeah.
Mm.
But sometimes like the smell, because I can't, he likes to cook liver, and I do not like the smell that
it
just,
does have a smell. Yeah.
Yeah.
and like chitlins, if they're not, oh yeah.
Yeah, chitlins
But
can smell bad.
I'll eat sausage that has natural intestine casing on it because it doesn't have that smell. And our sense of smell is so tied into
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
enjoyment of eating that it's no.
Who remembers
But
about a
if you
decade
look at-
ago when there was the rumor that a lot of calamari that was being sold in restaurants was actually sliced hog rectum?
Yes, that's
Oh.
right. And
Now I'm going to think
Uh,
of hog rectum every time I see sliced calamari.
You're welcome.
That's okay.
I
If you
think it
look at
ended up to
processed
be
foods-
mostly debunked, but maybe there was a kernel of
Mm.
actual
yeah,
happening
who
to it.
knows what some of that calamari is, but yeah, I remember there was a whole episode of This American Life.
Exactly, yeah.
About it, where they did a deep dive. They tried to figure it out.
Like the cheapest
Yeah.
hamburgers you can get, I think at Walmart have beef hearts in them. Like
Mm.
it's,
Yeah,
I think that's good.
it is probably good. It has lots of vitamins and minerals.
I mean,
and-
heart and tongue, those are also muscles, and so
Yeah.
it's not that different from the parts that
Yeah.
Americans usually eat, But yeah, that's
Sure.
when I love a lot of Mexican food, and so yeah, I'm big into the lengua is one of my favorites for tacos.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
cheeks, what's the word for the pork
Head
cheek or
cheese.
cow
No.
cheeks?
It's
Cachete?
cachete. Cachete is the
Cachete.
word, but I think cabeza, tacos de cabeza.
Yeah,
Is,
those are good.
yeah.
I eat
Mm.
that.
Mm.
All right, folks. Well, we're just a few minutes away from the part where we'll pivot to picking our next selection and general discussion with the recording turned off. But before we do that, I wanted to give Erika, first of all, a big thank you for joining us
Yes.
tonight,
thank
and also an opportunity. I kind of have had a burning question in the back of my mind since reading the book. Are you working on an errata, and is there any particular piece of errata that you think we ought to hear about? Like anything that needs updating in the book, due
Well,
to
so
new learning since it was
there
published?
are a couple of things that have come up since writing the book. One thing, so this is just what pops to mind, so there might be something else that you have in mind. But one thing that popped to mind was that in the book, I think we still didn't know that face mites have an anus. And now we do. Face mites have anuses.
Fucking
So
sleep
they are
soundly.
pooping.
Oh,
They are pooping
no.
in your face. So scientists, since I wrote that, scientists
Oh.
have actually zoomed in and discovered the actual teeny tiny butt of face mites. So that's just one small fact that I know has been updated since then. But please always let me know if I have any other things that
Mhm.
because science is ever evolving.
Mhm.
I hope you'll come back again on your next book.
I would love to. And thank you so much, all of you, for reading the book and for your feedback and for being curious, skeptical people. Go out there and save the world.
Mhm.
All right,
And
Erika,
with
thank
that,
you.
I will let you guys get on with the
Okay,
rest of
thank
your
you.
meeting. And thank you again. And I really enjoyed talking with all of you.